Hello and welcome, it's Janet Beckers here, and you are listening to Romance Your Tribe Radio podcast. And today on the podcast, our topic is all about podcasting. Why would you want to start your own podcast anyway? So if you have been thinking for a while, it may be on your wish list that, you know what, I'm going to start a podcast one day. Or you may be having it on your I should do list of, I really should do a podcast, but. And if that but is, it looks like so much work, who am I to do this? How do I even start? Well, we're going to cover some of those things today for you. So if that sounds like you, you're really going to enjoy today's episode, because we're going to dive into what can you realistically expect as outcomes from actually launching a podcast. And then we're going to do a bit of a reality check on actually what's involved in running a podcast, because it is a lot of work. Then I'm also going to share with you some things where, where you want to run a podcast, but you don't want to have all of that commitment, or you don't want to have as much work, you don't want to have to spend as much time on it. I'm going to share with you a couple of quite clever things that you can be doing that allow you to do some podcasting without having to get tied down so much with that. So we're going to look at those different options and what kind of outcomes you can expect from those possibilities that you can do with your podcasting. So how does that sound to you? And along the way, I'll share a few stories with you of my experience with podcasting, because it's something that I have been doing in different forms for quite a few years now, and helping a lot of my clients to launch their own podcasts and get really good results with them. So we're going to be able to have a look at some of that as well. So let's get started. First of all, what is a podcast? Now, really, a podcast, if you think about your typical podcast, you might go over to iTunes, which is the most common podcasting platform, but you could be over on Google Play, you could be on Stitcher, you could be on any of the Android apps. Really, a podcast is a way for you to be able to listen or watch on video, audio files or video files on demand, and that they get released on regular intervals, and you can go back and listen to all the past ones, and you're just getting it in a format so it is easy for you to be able to consume. So really, that's all a podcast is either a video or an audio that you get to listen to, and it's produced regularly, and you can be listening or watching it in lots of different places. You might be watching it on iTunes, you might be watching it, if it's a video, you might also be watching it on YouTube, you could be seeing it on social media, and very likely you will also be seeing it on a blog. So that's what a podcast is. Now, your most typical podcast, let's start there with the typical podcast and what kind of experience that you can expect to have as the podcast host if you start it, what kind of outcomes that you can have. Now, you're listening or watching at the moment a very typical podcast. So your typical podcast is one where it is usually put out weekly. It will have either somebody who's being interviewed, it could be an interview format, or it could be where you have the host teaching. It could be where you might have a couple of hosts that banter off each other, or it could be a combination of the lot of them. And they usually will go for a period of, say, between 20 minutes up to an hour is the pretty standard format for a podcast. So that's what you're doing at the moment through Romance Your Tribe Radio. Is in a lot of ways the format that I am using to produce Romance Your Tribe Radio is a very, very common, very typical and very successful format to use. So if this is the kind of podcast that you've been thinking when you think, I'd like to start a podcast, or I really should start a podcast, let's first of all look at what kind of outcomes you can expect from using that particular format. So now if you're watching this on video and you see my eyes flick off every now and then, it's because I've got some notes here in front of me, because I don't want to forget to leave any of these notes here for you. So if I flick down there, that's what I'm doing, okay? So let's do the first thing. If you're going to be interviewing people through your podcast, there's some really great things that come from that. Now, with Romance Your Tribe Radio, I alternate. Every second week, I have an interview that I do with somebody who I really respect and adore, somebody who I really want to introduce you to. So I do interviews in that way, and then I alternate. The second week is going to be me, like I'm doing right now, teaching you in depth on a topic. So let's first of all look at the advantages of the interview format, and then we'll have got the advantages of doing what I'm doing in this episode, the teaching format, and so you get an idea of which of those ones is going to be best for you, or if, like me, you're going to mix it up. So if you're using the interview format, this is kind of like the Oprah effect. This is where you may not actually be very well known in your industry. You may just be starting out, but you get to bask in the glory of the people who you interview. So you are seen as an expert by association. You get to be the passionate reporter. And in fact, this is how I started my wonderful web women business, which is now going back about a decade. I've been doing that this long. Now, it wasn't podcasting then, so I did that through a weekly interview and then sent it out to everybody. Then, after a time, I was able to repurpose those interviews as a podcast. So I actually just took those interviews and put them as a podcast. Now, the nice part with me is I was totally new. I had no mailing list. Nobody knew who I was. But very, very quickly was seen as being an expert because I was talking to experts. So we were seen as being equal. So that is a real advantage. It's number one, you get to position yourself as somebody to take notice of in your industry very quickly by being the podcast host. Now, the other side that comes with that is because you are interviewing experts, you're emailing them, inviting them, you're talking to them actually on your recordings, and you have a bit of a talk before you start hitting the record button or after it, so you get to know each other. It is such a wonderful way for you to start developing relationships with significant people in your industry. So that is a really strong benefit, and in fact for me that was one of the things that really launched my business in the first place, was those relationships that I developed. In fact, when I started my business, Wonderful Web Women, that was one of the biggest advantages that came to me, was the contacts that I made with all these wonderful people in my industry. So I then was able to, these people who I ended up doing joint ventures with, people who gave me opportunities to present on their stages, people who invited me to their weddings, it became a way of being able to really start to get to know influential people in your industry. So that is a great advantage, another one of the interview format. Now, another advantage of the interview format is it means that you can provide really good quality ongoing content that you can be putting out to the marketplace to be able to attract new clients to you, to really develop those relationships with your existing subscribers, and to continue your relationships with your customers. You get to create really good content, but you don't have to come up with it all the time because you're interviewing the people who are the content experts on whatever it is that you're interviewing them on. So that is a really fantastic way, especially when you may be really struggling to come up with content ideas. This is a really nice way to be able to do that. So that's another great advantage of the expert model. Now, let's also look at other people who you could be interviewing. You can also be interviewing your clients. Now, in one of the podcasts that I was running a few years ago, and I think I might start it up again soon, was specifically around interviewing clients of mine. It's called Rising Stars Radio, and for quite a while there I wasn't even the host of it. I actually had students of mine who were learning how to podcast or learning how to interview. They were actually interviewing other students of mine about what sort of results they got through with my programs. So yeah, I think I'll start that one again, or I may just include those sorts of interviews as part of this series that I've got now. They may be some of the people who I have as my interviews, people who've taken taken action with what I teach and got results, no matter large or small, but they've got results. So this is a great way for you to be able to shine the light on your clients, and been doing it in a story way. So it's even stronger than a testimonial because they're sharing their story. So that is another great way for you to be able to interview and to be able to get those stories from your clients as well. So it doesn't just have to be the experts. Now, if you're going to be the person where it is you who is going to be the person who is teaching, or you may have somebody that you're routinely having as a host that you're bantering off each other but you're teaching, is that gives you an opportunity to really be able to demonstrate to people what it would be like to work with you, because they will get to hear your expertise. They'll get to see the way that you communicate, the way that you think. Are you an organized person? Are you more of a story liaison, wandering around type person? Different ways that you work. So they get a feel of who you are, but also what is it like to work with you and how much do you know? So that can be a really powerful way to do it. So that's why I alternate, because I want you to get a feel for what it is to be able to work with me, to get a feel for what it is like to do my Rising Stars coaching program, or to be going through any of my learning programs on, say, video marketing, which includes, in my video marketing one includes, how do you podcast, how do you do video podcasts. All those steps are in my video programs. Or you might be looking at, you get a feel for what it's like to do any of my other coaching programs where it's got me teaching. So that's why I do that. And also I've got so much knowledge on so many different things after all of the people I've worked with, that I know that I can be teaching you a lot over a long time here and not even touch on the stuff that I do in my paid programs. So if you're in a position where you know your stuff and you've got so much to be able to share, this can be another great thing for you to be able to do those teaching sort of programs. So that's why I alternate. I like to have the experts, and I like to be able to teach as well, and it mixes it up for you as well. So these are the advantages if you can use those particular methods of either the expert interviews with your clients who've taken action, and teaching classes where you're actually teaching just you straight to the camera or just to the audio. These are the fantastic outcomes you get. And it also means that you are continually producing high quality content. And so, it allows you to have a routine that you develop around that. So you know that you're always going to be creating some really good content that positions you as the expert, that attracts new people and develops those relationships with existing clients. So you have a routine around there. So if that's the one that works for you, that's all you got to do, okay? And it also allows you that, I'm creating this video. I could just put it on YouTube if I wanted to. But I've chosen to put it on YouTube. I've then also chosen to put it on my blog. I've also chosen to just take the audio out of it and put that over on to iTunes and the other podcast directories. I could put the video if I wanted to, but I prefer for longer ones, and these are all longer, like 20 minutes or more, to teach. I think audio works a lot better for people if they're going to be doing it through a podcast platform, which is usually their phone. So, and then I also make it so that it goes out to social media. I do a blog article on it. We do the transcripts. I'm milking it, baby, for all it's worth. So it allows you to create really good content and repurpose it. And so, once you've got your routines around that, then it means that you know that you're always going to be giving great input. So these are the things that are the real benefits of the traditional method. Now let's have a look at a couple of the biggest objections that you will have to creating a podcast, and these are very, very real. You have to really consider these before you even think about doing it, okay? And I'm going to give you a few alternatives that may be easier for you to do, that are still going to be making the most of the, the platforms that you can be doing with your podcasting. So here are the big ones that you've got. Number one, it's a hell of a lot of work. I'm going to be honest with you here. For me to, for example, this episode, for me to create this episode, I've gone back to surveys that I've done of my clients or my subscribers about what were their questions, their big problems, things that they wanted to know about, and identified topics. Then I've gone and looked for what kind of keywords are the best things to do. So I'm doing it systematically. Then I've gone, okay, well, what am I going to talk about? So I have to work out what is my content plan so that I'm not just rambling. Then I have to record it. So I'm recording this on video. Then there is the editing. Now, I don't do that. I've got systems. I've got other people that do all that for me. But, there is the editing. There is going to be getting it transcribed. There's going to be putting it onto the blog. There's putting out the emails. There's all of the automation stuff to be set up in the first place. I do not think that because this is a common thing to do, that it's easy. It is a lot of work. And so that's a reality check. So if you're going to be deciding that you're going to do, say, a traditional podcast, the one that may be between 20 to 60 minutes, it's going every week, and you're going to be producing that content and putting it out there, be aware that this is going to take you time. This is going to be a serious chunk of your time. So if you're going to do this, you absolutely need to have systems around it. As I said to you, I'm the one that comes up with the topic. I'm the one that records this. I'm the one that works out the content. I am not the one that does anything after that. Other people do all of that for me. But we've got our systems, we've got our routines, and these are actually routines that I share and teach as part of my video marketing program. You may think that podcasting doesn't really fit under video marketing, but I just teach how to use video marketing, how to use videos, and then just leverage it. If you're going to create a video, milk it, baby. So that's number one. Now, let me also share with you another way. So we've got that, just accept that this is a lot of work, okay? It is. And so be prepared to create systems around it. But what if you go, look, I want to have something that's regular, and I want to be able to have the systems, but I so don't want to be spending that amount of time doing all those interviews. And I don't want to spend the time really putting down some comprehensive teaching like I'm doing with you now. I want to have that nice advantage of having regular contact, being out there, being seen, being consistent, but without all the work. Well, here is another great solution. And this is one that I did for 4 years with Wonderful Web TV. And it's the format that I teach in my video marketing programs, and that I have had hundreds of clients go through and use. And that is doing all of those, leveraging all of the technology and really leveraging all of that consistency, but you're creating videos and they're only about 3 minutes long. You can even create audios for just 3 minutes long. I've got one of my clients that's decided that's the format she's going to do. She's going to do about 5 minutes, and they're all audio. Now, for me, the video is such a beautiful way to be able to get to, build a relationship with you. So I really like to teach people to use video. But 3 to 5 minutes, I did that for 4 years with Wonderful Web TV, and I only shot my film about once every 3 months. With little tiny short ones like this, you can batch really, really well. So that's your way to get around it. It's a really good format. And it's a format that I may even start including again. But after 4 years, I found with me I was starting to repeat a few topics, and I really wanted to be able to dive in deeper. And also, I was missing interviewing people. That's where I started from, and I love it. So I wanted to start doing an interview podcast again, so that I could start, having those conversations with friends again. So for me, that's why I did it. So that for 4 years, that worked exceptionally well, and I've got a lot of clients whose businesses started and took off simply because they started using those videos. I'll share with you later. You can go to romanceyourtribe.com/video kickstart. I'll share the links down below if you come over onto the blog page as well. That's where there's got some free training that teaches you about how you put all together the 3-minute video series, and what sort of software and how do you work out all your topics. I've got all of that there for you for free, okay? So you can get those links. That's my gift for you to go along with this. So that's one way that you can do it, and you can really, if you're going to do the work, you may as milk it as much as you do, and any content you create, create take bits of content out of it, use it on social media, use it on your blogs, just milk it, baby. So yes, it is a hell of a lot of work, but that is one alternative. Now, the other objection that people have, and you might have this too, is, once I start it, this is a huge commitment. I could be doing this for years. I just shared with you, I did Wonderful Web TV for 4 years. Think about it, that's over 200 episodes. So, you could be thinking, this is way too much of a commitment. I don't want to do this. So let's have a look at that answer. You may not realize Romance Your Tribe Radio, even though at the time of me filming this, I've only been running it again for about a month, is I actually launched this a couple of years ago. And I launched it as a short-term series. I think it maybe had, say, 8 or 9 interviews. I can't quite remember. You can have a look at you can look and see how many I've done. And the reason I launched it was I was launching my book, Romance Your Tribe, the Romance Your Tribe Online. And as part of that, I wanted to include case studies. And I wanted to include some interviews with people who I thought built their tribe really well. So that's what I did. I thought, well, if I'm going to do some interviews and I'm going to have those as case studies to put in my book, I may as well record them. And I may as well record them in a format that would make really good sense for a podcast. And that's what I did. So those interviews, I transcribed them, condensed them. I say I did, my transcriptionist. And they went into the book. And then I was able to use that as the podcast. So I milked it for all I could. And the thing was, it was only ever going to be a short-term podcast. And so I did a lot of my marketing. It was just part of my marketing when I launched the book, is go and get the podcast as well. So it only had to be there for a short time. It achieved my goal. I've got one of my clients at the moment who is writing a book, and as a big part of her book is case studies of people who've created success doing what it is that she helps people to do. And so what she's doing is exactly what I did. She's doing these interviews for her book, but she's doing it and she's creating a podcast at the same time. So when the book goes live, so will the podcast. That's a great way to do it. So it's going to be there all the time. You can keep on sending back to people to go and see all of the past recorded episodes. And so you've got that there working for you. I have one client who she did her weekly videos for 1 year. And then she said, look, I haven't produced any more videos since, but those videos that I produce weekly and that I had podcasted out to iTunes and everywhere are still bringing me in clients. So you don't have to do it forever. And that's the other way you can do it. You can be using it for a book. You can also be doing it as seasons. So you can get around letting people know this is not forever. You can say, this is season 1. And, you may do it for a period of time until you're sick of it. And then you can decide, okay, well, I'm going to do it again next year. And we'll call it season 2. The other side that you've got is it's up to you how often you want to do it. You don't have to do it weekly. You might decide that you're going to do a podcast and it just goes out once a month. You're in charge, baby. You do what you want to do. You may be doing other things that are going to be maybe even related to the episodes, but that you're going to be doing as your content in the weeks in between. And this is the thing. You do not have to do the same as everybody. You just have to be very, very clear on why would you want to start a podcast in the first place. Is a podcast the best way for you to achieve those outcomes? Because there's other ways. And if so, well, what format are you going to do? You're in charge, baby. You can decide. Am I going to do the short and sweet videos? Am I going to make it just me? Am I going to interview experts? Am I going to interview clients? Am I going to find a co-host and bounce ideas off? Am I going to do a mixture of the whole thing? Am I going to do it for seasons? Am I just going to do it short term to launch a new program, launch a book? Am I going to be doing this as the long haul because it's something that I want to keep on doing? You know what? It is up to you. So be very clear on what outcomes you want to achieve and what's going to be the best format for you to do that and what will work within the constraints of your business. So I would love to hear from you. Have you been thinking about starting a podcast? I'd love to hear if this has helped you to be able to make that decision. And why don't you share down below if you're here on the blog or you may be watching this on YouTube. Wherever you're watching this, come over to the website where you can leave your comments and, tell me, if you start a podcast, what's your topic going to be? What are you going to do it on? Which of the formats have I talked about works really well for you? I would love to hear that. So please leave your comments and share this with any of your friends. And I'll also share on the website some of the resources that I've mentioned while I've been here. If you'd like to get some free training on the method that uses what I call a Me TV method, the short and sweet videos that build a connection, and that means that you're in people's inboxes every single week. The one that I used for years and my clients have used with a great success for years. Then you can go to romanceyourtribe.com/video kickstart. I had to think about that one. Video kickstart. You can go there, but I'll have the links down below. And I'll also include some links to the other podcasts that I've got over there on iTunes, so you can go and check them out as well. Okay, looking forward to hearing from you. Go get them, folks. Go out and take some action and get some results. Okay, bye.